Welcome to the Rank King Show, where music, movies, and more discussed and ranked for your listening pleasure. And now, your host, Billy. Hello, and I am so happy to be back and looking forward to doing another top 10 ranking. And today we're doing the studio albums of Soul Asylum. Soul Asylum is such an underrated and underappreciated band in the history of rock and roll. Now, they started up in the 80s. Many albums they came out with either independently on Twin Tone out of Minneapolis, the A&M label, moved on to the Columbia Records label, and back to independent. They're still going. They're still making great records. And I chose my top 10 list to rank for you today. Now, the reason I started off with a band like Soul Asylum and Fish is because these are bands that I haven't seen anybody else ranking the discographies of. So I wanted to do a top 10 ranking. Let's get started. Yes, I totally expect to get some people who are in disagreement of my list, but it's my list. And I would like you to comment below with your list if you agree or disagree with me. So let's get started. So at number 10, I'm starting off with 2012's Delayed Reaction. All these records are great. Gravity, Let's All Kill Each Other. Great tunes on the record. It's a solid album. Great production. That's what's starting off with my number 10. At number 9, I have another album that is in the newer class of records that they made from 2016, Change of Fortune. Supersonic is one of the catchiest songs you'll ever hear in their whole discography. What a fantastic lead-off song. Their later stuff is more along the lines of the pop-punk genre, not calling it pop-punk straightforward, but it has a lot of elements of those things, very poppy. Can't Help It, that's another one. That song on the record is more of a throwback to the 80s Soul Asylum. It's a solid record, and coming in at number 9, Change of Fortune from Soul Asylum. All right, let everybody start getting angry with me because this is where some people will be displeased with me starting right now. At number 8, I have the breakout record, Grave Dancers Union. Their first album on Columbia Records after leaving A&M Records after a 5 or 6 year stint. They came out with this album, and it was perfect timing for them. They released this album right when grunge and that whole Seattle thing was taking off. And it was good timing because it was right at the time where they were kind of lumped with those bands. And it carried them to a multi-platinum record, Grave Dancers Union. It's not a bad album, but to me, there's really big highs and then there's really low lows. That's just me, personally. Somebody to Shove, Black Gold, the big hit, Runaway Train, Without a Trace, The Sun-Maid. I love The Sun-Maid. But it's just that there's highs and there's lows, and to me, it's not a complete great record from Soul Asylum. It's a really good record. It's just my number 8. All right, for everybody to stay angry with me, stay angry, stay with me, okay? Because number 7, I have Let Your Dim Light Shine. 1995's release right after Grave Dancers Union. I Did My Best, Tell Me When, Shut Down, and one of their greatest songs of all time, Misery. The song's classic. It's a beautifully constructed record. It's a beautifully constructed song, and one of my favorite Soul Asylum songs, Misery. It's a solid record. Again, high highs, low lows. That's for me, personally. But I love everything they do. But I have to judge them against each other. And on my ranking, coming in at number 7 is Let Your Dim Light Shine. Now, I've changed my ranking order a couple times before I actually did this. And the next 2 albums were very much interchangeable for me. But I just happened to choose one a little bit more than the other. So at number 6, Made to Be Broken. Made to Be Broken, a lot of great songs on it. Some of my favorites, Tied to the Tracks, Never Really Been, that's on the record. It was produced by Bob Mould from Husker Du, and I've never liked Bob Mould's productions. And I don't really care for this production because of the amount of reverb. So at number 6, my personal choice and my ranking is Made to Be Broken. At number 5, I have my personal favorite out of the Twin Tone releases, While You Were Out. No Man's Land, Carry On, Closer to the Stars. I mean, the whole album's solid. The production's really good for a twin-tone independent release at the time. And the interesting thing about Soul Asylum that not a lot of people, I don't think, would notice is that they're very punky and they're very proggy at the same time, which is like an oxymoron. So they are, I would say, a progressive punk band, kind of, but then they have great ballads and pop songs, straightforward. So they are the true definition of alternative. And if you're looking at a band that really had a big impact on grunge being born, it would be The Replacements and it would be Soul Asylum. At number 5, While You Were Out. All right, number 4 is a staple. Out of all those Columbia album releases, this one is my favorite by far, and it's 1998's Candy from a Stranger. It wasn't as commercially successful as the previous 2 albums, but I think the songs were a lot more solid. The album was cohesive. There's not anything that you're going to skip over on the record. It's fantastic from beginning to end. Creatures of Habit, that's another one of my favorite Soul Asylum songs of all time. Cradle Chain, the whole album's solid. New York Blackout, from beginning to end, it's just a fantastic record. The production's really good. The songwriting's really good. And that is my number 4, Candy from a Stranger. Now we're down at my top 3, and I don't know if you could figure out what my top 3 are going to be, because probably you would have thought that my top 3 have already passed. Well, they haven't, and here they are. For their last A&M Records release, I have at number 3, And the Horse They Rode In On. They were a big staple of alternative videos in the late 80s and early 90s on MTV's 120 Minutes. And that was a show where they would show you real late at night for 2 hours alternative videos. And they called it alternative because it really couldn't be pinpointed by one genre. So you had everybody from heavy music like Ministry to Depeche Mode and electronic music, Erasure. You had The Cure. You had bands like the Ramones that were straight up punk. They were all lumped into one group called alternative music because they couldn't pick a genre, which made sense to me. So when you were looking for music back in the 80s and the early 90s that was not on the mainstream, because mainstream radio, basically you could either listen to Poison or Paula Abdul. That was pretty much the spectrum of what you were getting on mainstream radio. So if you wanted to look for alternative music or just something different to listen to, you watched 120 Minutes on MTV or you listened to college radio. And Soul Asylum was such a big inspiration, along with The Replacements and R.E.M., to bands like Nirvana, like Pearl Jam, like Soundgarden. They were kind of the beginnings of all that music. And they're so overlooked, which is amusing to me because they were kind of the reason that the rest of that stuff happened. So 1990s and The Horse They Rode In On. I love the album. Some of my favorite songs, again, on this record: All the King's Friends, We Three, Easy Street, Veil of Tears, Nice Guys Don't Get Paid. I mean, just fantastic songwriting. I love this album. The production is not as polished, and I don't think they really got a big budget from A&M to make a real polished record, but I think it might have hurt them a little bit to have a more polished record. So at number 3, I have And the Horse They Rode In On. Now at number 2, what's it going to be? Number 2, number 1, a lot of you hardcore Soul Asylum fans could figure it out. My number 2, I have 2006's The Silver Lining. What a fantastic record. What an unexpectedly fantastic record. Because at this point, it's been about 8 years since they released Candy from a Stranger on the Columbia record label. And they didn't have a record deal at this time. And they released it independent. And a lot of us Soul Asylum fans were waiting for this record to come out. And we kept on hearing, oh, it's going to come out, it's going to come out. And finally, 2006, we get this release thinking, well, they're putting something out. We already knew the song Oxygen because they used to play it live all the time. So hardcore Soul Asylum fans would be able to hear and knew that song Oxygen because it was always in their set list. When the album came out, it just blew everybody away, and it blew me away. Not a bad song on the record. Some of the catchiest stuff. A Crazy Mixed Up World is one of the catchiest songs you'll ever hear, and it will stick with you for eternity. The whole album's great. It's a triumph. And at number 2, The Silver Lining. Number 1, it is time for the number 1 ranked Soul Asylum album in their discography. And for that, I have 1988's Hang Time. Hang Time is a record of triumphant proportions. Tweedledee, Little Too Clean. Cartoon's one of the best songs in their whole catalog. Sometime to Return, classic. My favorite song on the whole record, Ode. Never get tired of it. Not as produced as some of their later works, and they didn't need it. It was beautiful. Just a solid group of songs, and a lot of tinges on some weird time signatures, and I would dare to say they're a little bit prog punk. But these songs are just beautifully written, well constructed, and at my number 1, I have Soul Asylum's Hang Time. So if you agree with me, awesome. You can comment and let me know. If you don't agree with me, please comment and let me know. I would love to know your choices. If you think I'm nuts, you can let me know that too. Please subscribe, please like for further rankings, and I really appreciate you watching and or listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.